ay automatic memory mpisa mbe like mbe subscribe na ma share na face notification bell no mo de monsa aboso ama ense na be ya abri bi the story tumu a wonya ntempa na face mo comment ye video ni so aman na yebura nsem ni mu a yebura mu wo in the first May mo amonim se the first May. The first May so the celebration kese ema ayijumafo amo Ghana hasi na mo amonim se May day die aya na omampenyin na be die chiri omoye celebration kese edema workers of Ghana na in the May day celebration and cause we greater Accra how akwa kopi mo Bolgatanga ntino eye na Addo danko Akufo-Addo etufa akwa kopi mo Bolgatanga na this time round the na beji chiri eye Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia endinichi na this time round Akufo-Addo nko anu kopi mo Bolgatanga akwa kodi May day celebration no work eye workers ayo Bolgatanga na okwa enu so no wankot na okeke otunenu mutuo odensem ahodo a emu ohwam emu ode e de atudwa ama eye workers of Ghana na odofo nsem no de emu ohwam emu nso ode na packages ewum no ano ohye umenko ni nkoti nsem a Akufo-Addo ode tudwa ma workers of Ghana umenko tie
members from Nandong, members of parliament, chairperson and members of the board of the Trades Union Congress, Secretary General of the Trades Union Congress, representatives of organized labor, the Tongorana and other traditional rulers, Ghanaian workers, fellow Ghanaians, ladies and gentlemen. It is always a great pleasure to be in the company of organized labor on the occasion of the International Workers' Day of Solidarity, May Day. Ghanaian workers, Aiko. The Vice President, who has always been present at May Day celebrations since 2017, has asked me to convey his apologies to you for not being able to make it today. He's welcoming the Prime Minister of one of Ghana's most important partners, Japan, who's arriving this morning in Accra for a 2-day official visit. He's the second Japanese Prime Minister ever to visit our country. God willing, next year, the Vice President will be with us again on May Day. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, it is good to be back in Bolgatanga, the city chosen for the 7th May Day celebration of my presidency. And I'm happy the leadership of organized labor continues to rotate the hosting of this all-important event for workers between the regions. It mirrors the now established practice of rotating the venue of our Independence Day celebrations. Long may these traditions continue. Since the onset of COVID-19, whose effects have been exacerbated by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, one of my major preoccupations continues to be the protection of lives and livelihoods. Indeed, this is a responsibility bestowed on me by the Constitution, and I want to reassure you that government will do whatever it takes to protect your incomes and pensions in these challenging times. When we met last year at the Black Star Square in Accra, I assured you of government's commitment to protecting the jobs and incomes of workers. Not only did we demonstrate this over the course of the year, we also proceeded to improve on the existing incomes of workers and pensioners alike. Organized labor appealed to government for the payment of cost of living allowance, COLA, for public sector workers to cushion them against the difficult economic conditions. In response, government and organized labor reached an agreement for the payment of 15% COLA to public sector workers. As a sign of goodwill for workers in the private sector, the National Tripartite Committee agreed to the payment of 15% COLA for them, in addition to the 10% upward adjustment of the 2023 National Daily Minimum Wage. In spite of the difficult challenges government employers face, this was made possible through consensus building to ensure businesses attain high levels of employment to hasten economic recovery. This is no mean feat, as it is the first time in the history of the determination of the National Daily Minimum Wage that the parties agreed to the payment of COLA after wage adjustment for the year has already been agreed. This is an indication of our collective resolve to protect workers and their standards of living. You would also recall that this year began with government and organized labor concluding negotiations on the 2023 base pay and pay point relativity for public sector workers in January 2023. Following a series of consultations and consensus building within the Public Services Joint Standing Negotiating Committee, the base pay on the single spine salary structure was increased by 30% over the 2022 figure, effective 1st January 2023. Indeed, the 30% increment of the 2023 base pay is the highest since the introduction of the single spine salary structure in 2010. It was made possible by the 2.5% increase in VAT. This increment will help mitigate the difficult conditions workers are facing, largely arising from the effects of global inflation. I urge organized labor to continue to work with the rest of the tripartite body to conclude negotiations of public sector salaries and the minimum wage for the 2024 financial year as soon as possible. On the issue of pensions, government recognizes the challenge posed by low pensions, resulting from the relatively low incomes workers receive during their working life. Because government is resolved to improve pension payouts, effective 1st January this year, all pensioners on the SNP pension roll as of 31st December 2022 have had their monthly pensions increased by 25%. This year's increase is a significant improvement over the 2022 rate of 10%, and also the highest increase of annual pensions since 2005, during the time of the government of another NPP president, His Excellency John Agyekum Kufuor. All these measures put together demonstrate to workers that the Akufo-Addo government is a listening one, a government which is committed to improving the lot of workers and their dependents. In the wake of the current global economic crisis, it has become even more imperative to protect workers. Our collective responsibility in achieving this objective is important, and it is for this reason that I consider the theme for today's celebration, protecting incomes and pensions in an era of economic crisis, our responsibility, as most appropriate. Secretary General, organized labor, it is evident that this current global crisis is the worst crisis the world has experienced in the past 50 years. In spite of the damaging effect of the crisis, we have managed to protect lives, livelihoods, and jobs, and kept the lights on. The crisis is having a profound impact on national economies and societies. Incomes, pensions, and investment funds are equally being affected as a result of the multiplier effects of the multifaceted crisis. Government's policy responses have been targeted to restoring macroeconomic stability, ensuring debt sustainability from the short-term mitigation options to addressing the long-term structural challenges and paving the way for sustainable and inclusive growth and development. I acknowledge the fact that over the past few months, the Ghanaian discourse has been dominated by the launch of the Domestic Debt Exchange Program. I wish to emphasize that participation in the Domestic Debt Exchange Program, voluntary as it was critical for the protection of the economy and the enhancement of our capacity to service our public debts effectively and create fiscal space for our growth and development. In the midst of the current economic crisis, we cannot risk defaulting in the payment of our public debts, which will attract severe consequences, and hence the debt exchange program. Despite the back and forth which characterized discussions with stakeholders on the domestic debt exchange program, government is truly grateful for the overwhelming participation of bondholders. The support, cooperation, input, and feedback government received to fine-tune eventually the domestic debt exchange program were unprecedented and reassuring. In undertaking the domestic debt exchange program, we have been very mindful of its potential impact on the pension funds of workers. We will not act in any way to shortchange workers in protecting their pensions. It is for this reason that government, through an MOU signed with organized labor on 22nd December 2022, decided to grant exemption to all pension funds in the domestic debt exchange program. At the same time, in the MOU, both government and organized labor agreed to work together, quote, to explore mutually beneficial options within debt sustainability limits and to also promote macroeconomic stability and economic recovery in the spirit of social partnership, unquote. In this regard, within global risk management practice, the options should include diversifying the portfolio of pension funds from the current 70% in government paper to real sector investments, including rail, housing, urban transportation, motorways, and airports, as is done by other pension funds. I'm aware that both the Minister for Finance and the Minister for Employment and Social Relations and their technical teams have been working with organized labor and its associations and pension fund managers and trustees to explore these mutually beneficial options. I'd like to use this occasion to appeal to organized labor to work urgently with government to conclude the discussions within the spirit of social partnership and burden sharing towards addressing our economic challenges and providing a stronger base for our rapid growth and development. We're also very much aware of the impact of the domestic debt exchange program on the domestic financial sector, and steps are being taken to mitigate the impact of the domestic debt exchange program on the sector. As has been announced by the Finance Minister, we're establishing the Ghana Financial Stability Fund to provide, among others, solvency and liquidity support to eligible financial sector institutions which may be affected by the domestic debt exchange program. In addition, the Bank of Ghana and the regulators in the financial sector space have provided some regulatory reliefs to support affected institutions. In keeping with our common objective government through the Financial Stability Council will monitor continuously the impact of the domestic debt exchange program on financial institutions to enable it to take remedial action if and when necessary. This will ensure that measures put in place to safeguard incomes, deposits, pensions, investor funds, and assets are effective. Mr. Secretary General, I agree with organized labor when it says protecting incomes and pensions in an era of economic crisis is our responsibility. This is evidenced by the fact that over the course of the year, government has kept every single public sector work on the payroll. There have been no job losses. Every public sector worker continues to keep his or her job. Even at the peak of the dual global health and economic crisis of the last 3 years, government ensured that no public sector worker was taken off the payroll as a result of the crisis. Government's posture today is the same, even in the difficult times we find ourselves. We've demonstrated this through our commitment to increases in the national daily minimum wage, base pay, and pension payments, amongst others, in spite of their fiscal impact on the economy. Indeed, these increments have been made possible because government is very empathetic towards the people, as it should be, and is very concerned about their plight and the future of our country. In so saying, I'm aware that the Ministers for Finance and Labor and Employment Relations are working on the payment to the retirees of 2020. SNIT has completed the computation and has forwarded to the Minister for Finance, who has assured me that it will be effected this year. And I want to take that opportunity to reiterate to you that assurance. It is important to emphasize that protecting pensions and incomes in an era of economic crisis is tied to increased productivity, enhanced revenue mobilization, effective expenditure management, and in particular, the effective and sustainable management of the public sector wage bill. Today, the expenditure on compensation of employees, which comprises wages and salaries, allowances, pensions, gratuities, and social security contributions, represents 56.101% of tax revenue, which is higher than the ECOWAS threshold of 35%, creating a serious fiscal crowd-out effect. This calls for immediate steps to increase productivity in the public service, as well as aggressively increase revenue collection by the Ghana Revenue Authority. Given that growth in public expenditure far outstrips that of revenue, it behoves on government to bring expenditures, including the public sector wage bill, to sustainable levels. Managing the public sector wage bill in a sustainable manner would inure to the protection of incomes and pensions, as it helps contain inflation. Mr. Secretary General, we brought inflation to single digits and sustained it for some time until the global crisis pushed inflation to its current heights. We have brought inflation to single digits before, and we will do it again. Secretary General, the quest to diversify the economy for greater macroeconomic outcomes has become more paramount than ever. The current crisis provides an impetus for diversifying trade and production and exploring alternative income earning opportunities. As you know, we are committed to the policy of domestic food security and export-driven value addition. It is in our interest to patronize domestic goods and services to hasten economic recovery, create jobs for our peoples, and boost their incomes. Many a time, we overlook the national pension for foreign goods and services, but are quick to blame government when it begins to have a toll on our foreign reserves. Government will continue to do what is within its control. However, consumer preference for goods and services must be deliberately championed by us all. We must patronize the services of our own, support them to grow, support them to employ our fellow Ghanaians, so that together we can contribute meaningfully to building the Ghana we all want. I urge everybody here to support the region by patronizing made in Ghana products, including food and drinks, before departing to your respective destinations. This is one of the ways in which we can protect the incomes of people working and living here in Bolgatanga. Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, dialogue, consultations, engagement in frank and open discussions remain very important routes through reaching consensus and proffering solutions for issues of national development. To this end, I'd like to entreat the tripartite, namely government, organized labor, and employers association, to reactivate the Social Partnership Council that was inaugurated in April 2019, but whose mandate came to an end in December 2022.